Hey, during this session, this is going to be really interactive. One of my favorite times at the ASCRS meeting is when they'd have a panel and they'd ask them, what do you guys do in this situation? And so really I hope that this will be an opportunity for us to interact, because what you're going to find, and even as listening to John and Steve, and they'll talk about Glenn, there's so many different techniques for doing all these things, and you're going to find all of us probably differ in the way we do them. So it'll be real fun to interact, and if you have some questions, I will not mind if you interrupt. We do have a microphone, though, if you would get on the microphone so that we can capture that on the tape for us. What we're going to do right now is just go through some situations so that you can begin to think about it. And one of my favorite things, and I always watch, I love watching, for those of you that are football fans, I love watching Bill Belichick, because he's such a genius in the way he thinks about football. And the thing that makes him so successful as a football coach, if you listen to him, he'll always say, we've got a game plan, and then all we have to do is go out and execute it. And all of you are familiar with this in cataract surgery, in your phaco surgery, where when you're looking at your list for surgeries the next day, if you've got a patient that you know has had previous trauma, you're going to be thinking about how you're going to manage that case. Or somebody that's on Flomax. As you start that case, you're thinking already in your mind, what am I going to do in these situations? So you're developing a plan, and then you're just going to execute what happens. And the thing about MSICS, it's no different than your phaco. You've got to have a plan in your mind, and then it's just getting your hands to do what your mind is telling you should happen. And you'll develop the skills, but I hope that in this session we'll talk a little bit about just our plan. So the first thing I want to start with in our plan is, how many of you have done MSICS or done anything, show of hand, how many have not done MSICS before? Okay, great. How many of you guys are doing topical anesthesia? Okay, so all of us that are doing phaco surgery here, most of us I think are doing topical. Those of you that are doing MSICS, how many of you are doing retrobulbar? Anything else? How many are doing peribulbar besides me? And anybody doing subtenons? Thinking about subtenons. So there's, as we know, in just doing anesthesia, there's different ways of just simply managing how we're going to control that eye during surgery. And the reason we like retrobulbar or peribulbar is we get not just anesthesia, but for the case where you can't speak the language, you can't talk to the patient, you get akinesia, and they're just not moving around, which is really nice. One of the things I want you to think about, though, for those of you that are doing retrobulbar, is this, my greatest dread, and I've done a lot of mission trips, and I'm often in places where there's not a hospital, and I carry my stuff out there, so I don't have my own film, because it's pretty basic where I go, is central spread of local anesthesia. And you guys may have read about that and studied that, and the risk is about 3 times higher with peribulbar because the needles are longer, and you have that possibility of just making a little puncture into the dural sheath of the nerve and sending some anesthesia into the midbrain. And these are some of the things that happen. You get sort of a mentally confused patient, the loss of contact with a patient, some extra ocular paresthesia. Sometimes they'll get a third nerve palsy. They'll start to have breathing problems, respiratory problems, and people die from this. And so I had one case of this that changed my life, and I thank God that it was on the Mercy ships, and we could intubate the patient and put them on a ventilator, and they did fine. About a half an hour later, we did their surgery. But if I was out in the field, I would have been doing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation for half an hour. And this changed the way I do anesthesia. I never have done a retrobulbar after that case. So I do peribulbar, and I use a 5/8 inch needle. Just something to think about. Any comments about that, guys?
I've had 2 of these cases, both of them on the mission field. One time, the second time it was no big deal. We were on a big group. It was in South America. We had an anesthesiologist with us, and I don't know if she was doing the blocks or who was doing the blocks, but regardless, she was in the pre-op area monitoring all these people. And I think we had about 6, 8 surgeons, so there's lots of surgery going on. I didn't find out about it until the end of the day. And it was no big deal. She said, yeah, this happened, and I had it on monitor, and then, I saw their breathing was going down. I bagged them for about 20 minutes. They started breathing on their own, and that was a great, wow, I found out about that at about 6 o'clock at dinner, saying, wow, that was kind of scary, but so glad you were there. I had no idea that happened. The other case was at a mission hospital, and it was the second to last case, about 7:30 at night, and I was doing the second to last case, and a technician who works at a retina practice, who does more blocks than I've ever done, is excellent at them, came in and said, Dr. Anderson, I said, yeah, that last patient? I said, yeah, he's not breathing and he doesn't have a pulse. He's laying on a gurney out in a hallway. I'm finishing the case. We've got a skeleton crew of foreign nationals who are helping us, and this guy's pulseless and not breathing. I'm like, my goodness. So they brought him into the other operating room. I quick finished the case I was on. Some of the people went out of our room. They started doing CPR on this guy. Fortunately, one of the nurses working with us was an anesthetist that worked in that hospital. We were able to get him intubated. He got an IV in a pulseless patient somehow. And miracle upon miracle, the guy revived. He was sitting up talking to his wife the next day in bed, neurologically intact. But that easily could have gone the other way. And the only reason he's not dead today, well, he did die 10 years later, as I got follow-up on him. He had heart issues and things. But the only reason he didn't die that night was that technician was watching him. So what I changed, and I'm hearing you, and I think there's some real, and I think the subtenons may be the way to go, actually. What I changed was we do retrobulbars, and we don't always have monitors available. But what we do have is people, and people monitor. So someone gets a retrobulbar, someone needs to be with that patient constantly. They need to know that as long as that patient's talking, you're okay. But that you can't just walk away on a busy day and let 4 people who had blocks kind of, get blocked and come back 20 minutes later. So that would be my take-home message. So I've personally experienced it twice, so it's real.
Yeah. John?
I haven't personally experienced, but I know of another mission hospital. An ophthalmologist who I know well was covering for the missionary ophthalmologist who is away. And while he was there, a patient died from a retrobulbar injection because no one was watching them closely. And so they blocked him, walked away. The person arrested, and no one saw it happen. But yeah, I block in the same room I'm operating in. So the patient's right next to me in the OR. And I harp on my staff, you have to watch him after you do a retrobulbar.
Well, I guess the take-home here is, even before you start, the first thing that's different about MSICS and phaco is that you're using a block. And so think about that and be aware of what you learned in medicine, and be prepared to handle things. I personally, because of that experience, I've gone to peribulbar and used a very short needle, and I've never had a problem. You can get some hemorrhages, but that's not going to kill anybody. And so just something to think about. And I think the ideas of advancing, going to subtenons, I've tried that, and I haven't gotten real good akinesia. And that's my problem, is they're moving around and I can't talk to them. Anyway, I just bring that up. Yeah.
Does anyone use...
Just a second. We're going to get you.
Does anyone use a super pinky or some device to lower the eye pressure after the block?
We routinely do, yeah.
What do you use?
We use a metal weighted thing.
Right, that's simple. We usually use a super pinky. Yeah.
I use a little Nerf ball that I get at Walmart with 2 of those rubber bands from putting a hemostat or for drawing blood, and we just tie it around, and you can't put it on too hard, and it softens them great.
Thank you.
And they're cheap. It's my Walmart Honan's balloon. Okay, so the next situation then that's a little bit different as we're kind of going through the case is you're using an anesthetic, which you don't normally use, and then these sort of tunnel issues that you're not used to having with your phaco. And so some of the issues that we've talked about, again, is you just being prepared to deal with those issues if you encounter these, and especially as novice MSICS surgeons, you'll encounter these things. It's like anything. If you know what you're doing, you can get out of trouble. And once you recognize the trouble. So these are a couple of them, and I'm going to just show you, again, I'm using one of Glenn's videos here. Let's see if I can get this started. So So there's Glenn's. You'll hear his music. I'm not going to run through the whole thing, but I want to point out to you. And again, they've pointed out, look where he's grabbing with his forceps. And that I agree with these guys over here. I don't like to grab that anterior lip because sooner or later you're going to have things like happen here in this case. And these are, Glenn was teaching residents is what he says. I don't know if that's the case or not, but here he is. And again, he's and there it is right there. So he just kind of slashed through. So what do you do when that happens, guys? I'm going to stop it right here. When you get either a premature entry or a buttonhole, what do you do in that situation where you get a lateral tear?
Small buttonhole, I don't worry about. Actually, if my blade comes through the anterior lip of the wound, I usually don't worry about it. I go back, kind of find my plane again. That usually isn't an issue, just a small buttonhole. If I've cut out the side of my wound like that, that's not going to seal very well. It's really the internal corneal lip that's going to seal everything for you. So as far as moving forward with the case, if I just cut the scleral side of the scleral wall, I'd probably just ignore it, finish the case, get it done, and then I'm probably going to suture that wound, even if it seals, and sometimes, amazingly, it does. If it's a small little, error, I'll leave it alone, but if any question, I just suture it.
John?
In that particular case, yeah, I think it's going to seal fine if the rest of the wound is made well. Again, I'd probably wait till the end of the case to deal with that particular thing. If I buttonhole, when he says he wouldn't worry about it, I think what I would do is I would come back out like he said, and if my whole wound was shallow, just go back to your main, your initial incision. You can make a new, go to somewhere other than that, the opposite side, and start tunneling in, and just make a whole new tunnel right below your superficial one. It's totally fine to have two tunnels stacked on each other. I do it all the time, especially if I'm training someone and they make a bad wound. I just kind of go back and restart.
I said that poorly. I do worry about it, and I do what he does. But that's why I don't worry. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
It's not like the case is
you can
over.
Fix it.
I back up, and you redo things, and that usually ends up not being a big problem.
That's great. And so I think the take-home lesson, and I think we all agree, is if you have a flap problem and you recognize it earlier, generally most of the time when you'll have a lateral tear like that is because your flap is pretty thin. Mm-hmm. And so you can always come back out and go in a deeper plane and make a nice flap, and it'll just layer right up under there, and it won't hurt a thing. So again, being aware of that, recognize that situation, and then make appropriate plans to execute a right plan. Here's another one that something that I actually, this is something, if you see a case like this in the States, you're going to have a hard day. You're thinking, what in the world am I going to do? And it's going to be a rough day, and it's going to take me an hour to phaco this thing, right? And you're kind of going, oh boy, maybe I'll refer this patient. With MSICS, these are the kind where I go, yes, because there's no cortex to take out. I love these cases. They're so easy. You just get the nucleus out and boom. I mean, they're really fun because it's the simplest case you're going to have. Let me just stop here, and I won't play the video for time's sake. You see a case like this, what's the first thing you guys are thinking about? This is a dense black nucleus, rock hard. What are you thinking about?
I'm excited too. Honestly, for MSICS, I prefer a mature cataract over a non-mature cataract any day. For
How
same
are you going
reasons.
to plan this case? Think about your plan for this case.
Well, I would say I'm excited too. And maybe we're gluttons for punishment, but we're really not, because with MSICS, this is a walk in the park, really. So if I'm on a mission trip, I'm excited because, wow, this is going to be a dramatic improvement for this patient. This is exactly the kind of patient I want to see, and it's no problem to do MSICS on it. If I'm in the United States, I'm excited because, oh, great, I don't have to go abroad to keep my skill set up. I get to do it right here in my own OR in a better setting. So either way, I'm excited about these things, and often these patients have sometimes gotten passed around. I had one patient, took her 2 years, and 3 surgeons turned her down for surgery. She had a black cataract like this. She had a CRVO and didn't have great visual potential, but a retina doctor finally sent her to me saying, please do this. I can't follow her retina. She may get neovascularization. I looked at her, turned away from her, and went to the computer to start typing my note. I said, yeah, we can do this, and went to start typing my note. And I looked back, and here's this lady's jaw open. I was like, what did I say? What did I do? And she goes, you don't understand. I've been to 3 surgeons, and none of them would do my case. You looked at me and in 10 seconds said, yeah, we could do that. That's the power of MSICS, and that's the power of MSICS in your practice here. That it will not intimidate you. These cases are really fairly routine. I would maybe plan, if you said what to plan, I wouldn't plan on making a 5.5 millimeter external incision.
Give yourself
I'd make a bigger
an A.
incision.
So Steve gets it right. And the thing I've actually had here in the States, once people know you do M6, I've had other phaco surgeons refer these cases to me because we know they're tough. I mean, it's going to be an hour if you're trying to phaco that. But the reason I put this in here is when you're looking at this case, it's like when you're thinking Flomax, and I always tell my people, okay, have some epi ready and let's put in, something, or get them a ring ready or something. When I see a case like this, my first thought is go big or go home. I'm going to make my incision bigger. And if I do that from the start, I won't have trouble because I know this is going to be, there's no cortex. This is a big, dense rock. And I just know I'm going to make a big opening, and then the case is smooth. If you make your opening too small, stop and open it up. But that's what this case teaches me as I think about it and plan it, make a big opening.
And make it big from the beginning is way easier.
Yes.
Quick question about the capsulotomy on that black cataract. How do you guys stage the black cataract versus just the white cataract or anything like that? Do you continue doing your CCC, Dr. Anderson, or do you convert to
I do, because in my hands I'm used to doing it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for everybody, especially as you're starting. I do, and I have a very low threshold for extending it. In a case like that, there's a high probability I'm going to put some relaxing incisions. So I'll do a big rhexis. If I don't get a big rhexis, I'm going to extend it right away. If I get what I think is a big enough rhexis, I'll try rotating it out just a couple of times. If it's not coming easily, I right away make some relaxing incisions, and then it'll come right out.
Do you find that trypan blue stains the capsule enough to get a
Yeah.
CC?
Yeah, typically.
Just following up on your comment that you do this with a case in the States, is it acceptable to do M6 for cataracts in the U.S.? Is that in these type of cases, or just generally, is that standard of care?
Well, if they come out 20/20 uncorrected the next day, which I've had patients in the U.S. coming in with hand motion vision, day one post-op, 20/20, I think that's a pretty acceptable outcome. So the outcomes with phaco and M6 are the same. So there's no contraindication, in my opinion, no contraindication whatsoever to M6 in the U.S. for appropriate cases. You got a 20/25 PSC cataract. I mean, if you get a good outcome, okay, but phaco would probably be the way to go in the U.S.
Yeah, you're going to put so much phaco energy into that eye.
Yeah.
They're not going to have a clear cornea probably the next day.
No.
M6, they can have a crystal clear cornea. I mean, doesn't matter if it's a huge cataract. If you take it out right, it's beautiful.
Say if something happens and then, the hospital looks better, to the chart. So M6 is considered an acceptable technique to incorporate in practice.
If I had to review a case like that, and someone did phaco on that, and they ended up having post-op corneal edema that didn't resolve and needed a transplant, and there was a lawsuit, I think you can make an argument to say phaco might have been kind of contraindicated, especially if they had little Fuchs or something along with that. I mean, I think you can make the argument the other way, that M6 was the gentler, better technique, and if they weren't able to do that, they should have referred them to somebody that could. So, phaco isn't for everything.
I got a question here.
In the U.S., where your lens consignment is primarily foldable acrylic or silicone, do you still take the time to order a single-piece PMMA?
I use a 3-piece foldable lens. So I prefer PMMA, but and I do use PMMA lenses in the U.S. Sometimes I will order a PMMA just because it's already in the hospital. They don't have PMMA lenses as a consignment, so I typically will use a 3-piece. But I'd prefer a 3-piece over a single piece for an M6 case. Just it rotates in easier.
I put in a 3-piece acrylic. I don't have PMMA in my clinic anymore, so I use a 3-piece acrylic in case I need to put.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. In case I need to put it in the sulcus, I've got a 3-piece.
And you can get PMMA lenses here, and I have ordered them
Yeah.
in certain circumstances.
Yeah, so to his question, I was thinking to say that it wouldn't be standard of care would kind of be equivalent of saying that normal ECI would not be standard of care. I mean, if normal ECI is standard of care, this causes less astigmatism. It seems like you'd have to call ECI in a black cataract not standard of care, which is kind of nonsensical. And so,
I
as long as
don't
you've
know.
done it, I mean,
Yeah,
as long
I
as
think
you-
whatever the surgeon is most comfortable with, you know, I don't think it's wrong. I don't think somebody could, I don't think it's wrong to fake or something like that. I do, actually, personally.
And
But,
you can put this in the case of, we're going to look at like loose zonules and things where it's just dangerous to do phaco.
Right.
And that's why they're sending them to me, because they don't want to do phaco. These
Right.
are experienced phaco surgeons.
So I guess my point would be just if someone were to say it's not standard of care, it would kind of be the equivalent if the surgeon is experienced at all in doing
Right.
it, or at least as experienced as we are in doing ECI, which a lot of us young surgeons are not all that experienced in doing. You'd have to say that it's at least as standard as ECI.
I think between ECI and MSICS, I actually,
M6 is
I
better.
can't think of an indication for ECI
Right.
anymore.
Right.
With M6 available,
And that's what I'm saying. It
I
would
don't
not
see
be
any
able to
reason
be
for it.
deemed under the standard. I would, unless you.
I think
never
whatever
done
you're
it.
comfortable with. If somebody has a really good, you know, standard extra cap and they've never done M6, go with what you're comfortable with. But yeah.
This is more of a U.S. question as well, but do you guys have a different consent form if you do M6 on a patient versus phaco?
I'll put M6 on the form if I know I'm going to do an M6, you know, but it's the same consent form. Basically, it's just cataract surgery, but I'll write manual small incision cataract surgery. But if I have to convert, no. I mean, it's,
I use the same consent, but obviously a different op report.
Right.
It's just taking out a cataract.
Right.
And so I don't change my consents. It's, you know, it's kind of like, yeah, do I do a temporal incision phaco or a superior incision clear cornea? Whatever gets it out. Let's move on. Great questions. In answer to your question, I use a can opener on those. On the really black ones, I've just found no matter, even with trypan, I can't see them. So and we'll look at some cases too where you literally can't do CCC. And so what I want you to get in mind here is, just like with phaco, there's a whole bag of tools, and you really want to at least be aware of all the tools. Not that you're going to do them every time, but there may be cases where you need to pull out a tool that you don't use every case. And so here's a case, a different case. Big white cataract. We looked at the big black cataracts. How do you guys, when you see an eye like this, what are you thinking pre-op? How are you planning your case? John?
Even better. You know, this is what is perfect case for M6. I'm just going to do my standard M6. Here, you might even have a little bit smaller. You're going to have a smaller nucleus, so you don't need to go as big. And so that's probably going to be a smaller brown nucleus hiding under there. That's going to pop right out. This is going to be a super fast case, most likely. For me, with the V capsulotomy, I don't care what I mean, it's going to do whatever I need it to do. And if I need to use scissors to extend around a plaque or something, I'll just go in with Van Ness to help it out. But in general, the V capsulotomy is going to take on anything.
Great. Steve?
same. I'd say the same thing. I would guess that this nucleus is going to be smaller, so I'd be tempted to make my wound smaller, but typically I'm often wrong. You know, if I usually guess it's going to be smaller than it really is, it's usually bigger. But I'll look at the age of the patient too. You know, if this is a 45-year-old with kind of an unusual white cataract, they're not going to have a big nucleus. If it's an 85-year-old, you know, and what's their nutritional status and things like that. But kind of maybe gauge my wound a little bit, but again, error probably bigger than smaller than you think it's going to be. Trypan blue is going to work great on this. It's pretty standard. You know, it should be a pretty straightforward case.
The one thing, question.
And in the U.S., actually, you know, if it's a 45-year-old with a white cataract, you probably phaco it because it's not going to be a dense nucleus. So.
Steve, can you just elaborate on how, just your exact technique for using trypan blue? Because I usually, right now, I wash out. Just how much do you draw up, and then the air, and then the...
Yeah, you know, how you exactly do it, just trying to stay in the capsule. So I don't think it's critical. What I've developed over time is a resource-conserving, time-conserving method. And so that's where I'm driven, whether you inject it in, then irrigate it out, then put your viscoelasting, and you're getting the same job done. What I do is I take a 1 cc syringe, because the calipers of it is small, and I'll drop a half a cc, or the nurse will drop a half cc of trypan, and sometimes they even dilute it if I'm on a mission trip so that, you know, you get more out of it. And then the second half of the cc is air. Put a cannula on it, and then I inject that just one fell swoop into the anterior chamber. The air bubble goes in first, goes up. The trypan blue then goes down below that, right onto the capsule. Sometimes you can even kind of paint it over the capsule, so you're really not putting much trypan blue in the eye. And then I take my viscoelastic and put it through this paracentesis, eject from the far side of the eye over, and it pushes the air bubble and the trypan blue out all in one fell swoop. And it's fast, efficient, and you don't use much for resources. So that just works for me. I don't think it's a right or a wrong way. It's just what I happen to do. So.
I'm going to move along. One thing when I see a case like this, and you guys, and you probably see this in your cases here in the States too, is one of the things that worries me when I see one like this, and this one looks a little bit more kind of modulated than I see, but sometimes these things can be wide. They can really split, and you can get an Argentinian flag real fast. And so on these kind of cases, what I'll often do is I'll start my Rexus right in the center, just puncture it, and let that milk bleed out a little bit, maybe even wash it out, and then I can go in and do my can opener. So just something to think about. You just want to be aware that they can have a lot of pressure because of the milk in there that is spreading those things. So I just think about those. This one doesn't show it, and I've got some pictures, but sometimes you'll get a really fibrous plaque, and I think, John, you were talking about that. When you get a really dense fibrous plaque on there, and a lot of our patients will have uveitis, and they've got other concurrent conditions going on. If they get a dense plaque, you can't sometimes use your Rexus, even a can opener. You've got to get in there with a scissors. So just be prepared for a lot of different ways to cut these things and get the capsule off of there. They'll stretch and spread horizontally as well. So you want to be careful with these. And be prepared, just again, with a bag of tricks. Stan, we're kind of late. Do you want to quit here? And I've got a bunch more. And
let's do 3 more minutes.
3 more minutes. Here's our fun case. And again, these kind of cases aren't, I find, I mean, and again, I mean, I've done enough of these where I don't even usually do much with a pupil, but what do you do when you see a pupil like this?
So I'd go in with it's the iris spatula, and I'd cleave all those synechii. If you're just starting M6, I would probably do hooks. I never do hooks almost ever with M6. I would go in under, I would cleave everything. If it opened up a little bit, great. If not, I would go under and do a blind V-capsulotomy under the iris. I would dial it out. If the lens didn't come out through the pupil, that's when I would go and do my snip pupilloplasty in 4 or 5 spots across from me, and it'll come right out.
It would depend on if I'm training somebody to do this, or if I'm doing it myself. It really would. And because small pupils, in my experience, are the #1 cause of complications later in the case. So what I usually tell people as I'm training them is, what's the problem? The problem here is a small pupil. So make the pupil big, and the problem becomes a routine case. So that's kind of the way I think about these things. If you've got a challenge, you got posterior synechia, break the synechia, make the problem go away. So I would do the same. I usually just use a viscoelastic cannula because I have it in my hand. These usually break real easily. I actually stretch the pupil pretty regularly, and that works really, really well for me. Grayther collar button and a Kuglen hook, kind of a cross swords technique, usually in 3 different directions. Usually expands the pupil beautifully, and then I can do my Rexus if I want, or I can do a can opener, linear, whatever I want to do. But now I've got good exposure, and the rest of the case just tends to go better. If it doesn't expand that way, or I don't want to stretch it, you can make those little incisions with the scissors, or even if I'm temporal, I just reach up with my Van Ness and just do a big cut on the iris. And I'll credit Udo Dirksen from Paraguay for giving me the permission to do that. We were on a trip one time, and there's 4 surgeons operating in the same room right after lunch, and 3 out of the 4 asked for a vitrectomy for a vitrector on their first case. And I was not quite to that point yet where I was asking for my vitrector, but I said, you guys all have small pupils, don't you? And they said, yep. And that's because everybody was dilated at 7 o'clock in the morning. And by lunchtime, it started out big, but then everybody's pupil got small, and every single one, 3 out of the 4 had complications with their first case because they had a small pupil. Udo Dirksen went through the whole day, had 0 complications, and then we were in a room together for a while, and I was like, what is your trick? And he operated superiorly, and he did keyhole capsulotomy. He just opened it up. He said, my pupil's small, I open it up. My patients don't care. The upper lid covers it, and I do this at home all the time, and I don't have complications. So he gave me permission. It's like, oh, you can cut the iris. Yes, you can. Better than dropping a nucleus.
There's a bunch of techniques. Again, you can try any or all of these. Sphincterotomies work really well. I've done some of those, but a lot of times with those small pupils, just stretching them, you'll find the more experience you get, you're going to be very comfortable in a small pupil because you're taking out a nucleus. You know, it's not like phaco where you got to see where you're at. We'll quit. We've got a few more, but we'll quit at this point. Thank you very much.